So we got an interesting episode today we're going to try out, of Void City Reviews. We're going to do something a little bit different here. We are going to talk about the newest Pendergast novel by
DouglasPreston and LincolnChild, titled Bloodless.
Yes. This is a long-running series. It's been going for probably decades now, I'd imagine.
The movie was in the 90s. So
yes, the movie came out the same year as Jurassic Park, the first movie of the first book in the series. It's called Relic. Some of you in Chicago might remember that. They filmed at the museum downtown because New York didn't want it filmed there because they thought the movie's monster would scare away children from coming to the museum in real life. In real life, it actually had the completely opposite effect, and Chicago's museums enjoyed a much higher volume of patronage because of the way the movie kind of showed the museum in a different way than anyone had ever seen it before.
I liked the movie in the 90s.
Yes.
I do not recommend modern audiences trying to watch it.
I believe I had heard they were thinking of making the sequel forever ago and then just didn't, which is probably good because that was not that great as far as the series goes. But it's leaps and bounds, in my opinion, better than Bloodless.
Yes. So we've both read all the books in the series.
Mm-hmm.
There are 20-ish?
Somewhere in there. I'm sure I'll add a caption that tells the actual amount.
So these two authors have been writing together for a couple of decades. They've written, besides the Pendergast series, there's also the Gideon series, and there's been standalone books before they started getting into Pendergast.
Yep, and they also have spin-off characters, so people that appear in Pendergast novels will go off and then have their own adventures and their own series, trilogies, all sorts of things.
Right. So easily over 25 books combined. They should know what they're doing by now. Bloodless is a low water mark.
It almost felt like it was written by new authors.
Yeah.
It's probably the most disjointed of their books, where you can almost feel, oh, here's one guy writing this part, and then, well, the other guy wrote this part entirely, and then let's get back to this guy. It had that sort of a feeling to it.
Now, I made some notes. on the book. It's divided up into non-spoilers and spoilers, so I'm going to try to, when we get to spoilers, put up a thing. So I think the first thing that, for both of us, because we listened to the audiobook, the very first thing that we need to talk about is the narrator.
Yes. As anyone who has listened to the audiobooks or on Audible or anywhere else of the Pendergast series knows, almost all of them were read by an actor named Rene Auberjonois.
Yeah.
He was excellent. Some of you guys might remember him from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Was he Odo? Odo, yes. He read these books like he was meant to read these books. And he was Aloysius Pendergast.
Oh, yeah.
He embodied that character. He brought it to life in a way that I think even sometimes the writing couldn't do. He added so much to just the whole universe of Pendergast and these novels that when he died a few years ago, unfortunately, that's the very first thing a lot of people thought was, who's going to read Pendergast now?
Right.
They got a new
narrator
for the first book after Renee passed, and you could tell it wasn't him.
I had no complaints.
But he did a good job. He tried very hard to get very close to the voices that Renee had used, the accents.
So one of the character specific points about Pendergast is he's from the South.
Yes.
So
he has a honeyed.
Yes.
Right. Every time I hear that, I'm like, what does that mean? But
it's a New Orleans accent. So it's sort of a little bit Southern. It's a little bit French, and Rene was fantastic at it.
He really was. Just the way he would deliver things, and just sort of the he was animated when it needed to be, but only just enough. He was deadpan when he needed to be, like perfectly. That said, this new narrator, he has a decent voice for reading straight up books. If he was just reading a book to me and didn't try to do voices or nothing, and it wasn't a Pendergast book where I've been used to hearing a certain set of voices for 20 some odd books now, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
Not bad at reading. Mm-hmm. Decent reader.
Yeah.
As a Pendergast narrator,
Well,
Most people we have found in the comments and other people, we're some of the two only people we know of that finished listening
it's true. Yes.
to this
Yes.
to this audiobook.
Right.
Most people either stop and don't finish it at all, or just go out and get the Kindle or the paper version
Yes.
and read that instead,
Right.
so they can hear in their head the voices the way they should sound.
Right. So all of the voices, to me, were sort of stereotypical.
They did. They
It's-
felt like,
It's like a caricature
yeah,
of somebody.
there is a Native American character, and imagine how Native Americans sounded in like old school Looney Tunes cartoons. That's kind of the voice he used for
Well, he was just-
Agent Cold Moon.
He was angry the entire book, and some of that is specific to the story because he's
Yes.
not where he's supposed to be, and he's doing things that are against what he wants to be doing. But he
But
was just
never
read.
turned that off.
He was read as angry the entire book.
Yeah.
The book is set in Georgia, and at one point there's a scene with
Savannah,
a character. Yes.
Specifically.
But there's a scene with a character that sounds, for some reason, Scottish,
Yeah. It
And-
was that.
cartoonish Scottish.
Yeah, not even a good Scottish. Like,
But
just bad.
the worst offense is a character named Constance.
Oh, Constance Green.
She's one of the main characters.
She's been in the series since very early on.
Yes.
Very quiet, soft-spoken. Again, not very
She's-
emotional. Kind of just like Pendergast. Very calm, sort of. When she says stuff, part of what makes it freaky is how calm she is.
Yes. But she is a young character
Yes.
that in this sounds like she's about 85.
I kid you not. A character that should sound like a, 23, maybe 24-year-old girl at this point. Sounds just like this. Oh, hello, Aloysius Pendergast. I suppose we should go check into the hotel now.
That's pretty accurate.
She, like, yell talked her lines and was just, again, like she sounded just angry all the time, even when she was
But it's-
supposed to be upset or scared or worried.
It's not just that he was bad at female characters, because the police chief was a woman.
Yeah.
Did a fine job
was
reading her.
fine.
But Constance,
He gave all the
Oh.
established characters the wrong accents.
true.
Almost every one of them. It felt like no one at all tried to prepare him for any of these roles, or for the fact that he's taking over on a series that is kind of beloved by a lot of people, very popular.
So that's point one. Is the
That's-
narration in this is terrible.
It is quite bad. Quite bad.
You were saying he's a fine narrator.
I mean, if he was just reading a normal, like a short story maybe or something that didn't, or just something where he decided not to do voices. Like if he just read everything straight through without trying to do accents or female voices or old voices or Native American voices, for God's sakes, I think it would have been okay.
See, I have a note on here that says boring ? And I don't know if it was the narrator or the book itself, because I was definitely spacing out sometimes.
I would lean towards book itself. This book just seemed like the whole point of it was just an exercise to get to a plot point that happens at the very end, which we will get into in the spoiler section later. But even that, everything that happened to get to that point just felt disjointed and random, like they had several baskets that they threw different things, like here's events in history, here's locations,
That's
here's
true.
mystery bag of problems we can have. Let's just,
Because there's
all right, this book's going to be in Savannah, Georgia. It's going to be about this old lady in Pendergast, and D.B. Cooper's going to be in it for some reason.
that's chapter 1. That's not even.
That's not a spoiler. That's
I
where
think
the book
that's
starts.
that's in the preview that's on Audible. It
Yeah.
starts with D.B. Cooper.
Yes, which we might get to that. That is the most convoluted.
That's chapter 1.
It literally felt like someone dared them, hey, can you work D.B. Cooper into the story?
But it takes about
They were like-
half a book to come back to that.
Yeah.
And the whole time you're just like,
And
what
by
does
the
this
time
have
they
to do
came
with
back
anything?
to it, I was almost like, what are they talking about? Oh, yeah, that was in this book, too. Oh, that's right. That thing that was completely unrelated to anything.
It was weird.
Yeah, it really seemed like it seemed pointless. Like, I don't get why they even, like, that whole part of it,
I
it
feel
wasn't
like
needed.
I feel like that was maybe throwing a bone to Cold Moon, But maybe we can get back to that in the spoiler section.
But see, to me, that whole part made Cold Moon seem like an idiot.
Well,
Cold Moon, an FBI agent, didn't know and had never heard of D.B. Cooper, the most famous unsolved FBI case in all of history.
So at a point during the book, they actually leave Savannah. They go somewhere else, and during this point, Pendergast is driving a car. So it's from Cold Moon's perspective, and he's just looking around the car. Pendergast has a camera in the backseat, and Cold Moon knows a lot of information about this camera.
Oh, he knew everything about it.
The price.
Yeah, he knew the price of every piece. He knew every accessory, what they were made out of, and what they did.
They get to a cabin in the woods, deep woods, and he's talking about the architecture of this cabin. But he doesn't know D.B. Cooper? I'm like, what?
Yeah,
this is
that's
weird.
The problem I used to have with Pendergast himself, to be honest. Sometimes back in the series, he would just, obviously he's like the Sherlock character. He's supposed to know everything, but even he sometimes would just whip out facts that didn't even make sense to his character. Like, there weren't even something that his character would have researched or known, but he just knew that too, because the story needed him to know it.
But he doesn't need to know specifics about a camera.
No, but
you have a camera. You take a picture.
Preston or Child just bought a nice new camera they really like, as they mentioned in the story, just took a trip to Savannah, Georgia, which, by the way, that's how they write most of their books. It's, hey, guess where we just went on vacation to? Well, let's write a story there. Doesn't matter if it makes sense at the point that this series is at, but we want it to be set there, so here's this thing that'll happen. Which is, I think, why a lot of the stuff that happens in this particular book that are just completely nonsensical happen, because they roped themselves into a corner, needed to get to that ending, had no idea how to get there. And to me, the reason they didn't know how to get there is because it's an ending that never should have happened. Now, this is the first book in what's going to be another Pendergast trilogy. They do this a lot. There's like a trilogy of books where usually every adventure of his is loosely connected to the past, but they're meant to where you can read them as standalones also.
Yeah.
The further they get in the series, I agree with that less and less, because there's just some things you kind of need to know about these characters, or else you're going to get to a point and be like, what? So you kind of do need to read them, and you do need to read them in order. I completely disagree with the authors who say you can read any one of them in any order and it won't matter. I think that's baloney.
I think we've reached a point where we can start talking about spoilers. So we'll put something up there.
Like this. So we're getting into spoiler territory now?
Yeah. I think we have to.
Oh, good God. So, should we talk a little bit about what Constance is? Constance Green is a science experiment.
Yes.
She was a young girl in her late teens, early 20s, probably like 19-ish, 20, who, with her sister, were abducted by an evil scientist in the late 1800s in New York. This doctor's name was Dr. Lang. Now, anyone who is into a lot of fiction or horror stuff or things like that might recognize that word from Lovecraft lore. And that's a very important thing to remember, because I think that these authors remembered it for this book, because that's part of where the nonsense starts to come in. Anyways, Constance was experimented on, so was her sister. Her sister died. Constance, on the other hand, through some formula she was given, was basically granted she doesn't age anymore.
As long as she was
taking the formula, she stayed like a 20-year-old forever.
Yes.
And just lived in the basement of this guy's house after he died and everything, and just lived there for 100 years, reading books by herself in the basement.
Right.
Until Pendergast, it was like, his house, because it was his ancient relative.
Yes.
He was related to this Lang somehow, and gets the house, and then he's just
granduncle
hanging out in the basement one day, and Constance comes out and is like, hey, what's up? And he's like, oh, hey, you want to be my ward? And she's like, sure, I'll be your ward, but I'm also in love with you. And he's like, and I'm kind of in love with you, but I can never act on it because I'm somewhere between the ages of 30 and 60. We can't really tell anymore. He just kind of stopped aging and then aged backwards for a little while, and now he's just kind of eternally around 35 or 40-ish, I think. Like, just... Anyway, yeah. So yeah.
In the Pendergast books, there's always some sort of supernatural-ish element,
but a lot of times,
it's usually one thing. So it'll be a straight crime story.
But even then, they try very hard to relate it to science. A lot of the time, like Constance, for example.
They try.
She was immortal for a while and didn't age. Clearly that can't happen, but they at least, it's science, and there was something scientific-y in there. He did something, we don't know what, but there was science.
It was okay. I accepted it, moved on.
Yeah, it wasn't like blatantly in your face, like, here's a ghost, or like, or a cyclops.
There's usually one element. This has multiple, and it's so far removed from the rest of the Pendergast series, I don't know what they were doing.
Should we just say the words right now?
I think it's time.
Lovecraftian old ones, not Cthulhu's, but creatures from Lovecraft dimensions of the plains of Leng, because Pendergast goes to the plains of Leng.
I'm going to back up. So, it
happens!
It starts with quantum computing in the 1970s that opens...
In a briefcase-sized contraption. Fit in a briefcase.
Yes. That opens a window into a parallel universe that's 1 minute in the future.
But is very close to our universe using the infinite worlds theory that anything that can happen has happened somewhere in the universe parallel to this one.
So already we've got quantum computing that works decades before.
In a briefcase during a time when calculators were still the size of a file cabinet.
Yes. Alternate dimensions. Yeah. And then there's a creature that comes through one of these worlds.
Yes. Which you took it literally. I took it the way Lovecraftian, because I've read every Lovecraft story. They do have a file on Audible that is every single Lovecraft piece of fiction ever written in one file, and these two guys read the whole thing all the way through, and it is mind-numbing at points, because that guy writes, I don't know what kind of drugs Lovecraft was on. There were many, and he was taking all of them all the time. But a lot of times they're described, these creatures, like insectoid, like weird insectoid, little itty-bitty heads on giant, big, bulbous bodies with tentacles and hair and leathery wings and stuff. And that's the only word that these authors ever use to describe this giant creature as, and it's because of what it does. They always called a big mosquito. But it wasn't a big mosquito. It just did what mosquitoes do and sucked people's blood out with a big tentacle tube on its face. But it had giant leather bat wings, a big furry, nasty, bulbous, floppy tentacle body, like a head covered in weird eyeballs. It flew around. It was maybe the size of a bus, maybe the size of a cow. That changed often and quite all the time.
So the actual crime that Cold Moon and Pendergast are in Savannah to investigate.
I don't even remember what that was.
It's a dead body drained of all of its blood.
That's right. The title, Bloodless. That's
Bloodless.
Right.
So they're in Savannah investigating this. A second body shows up, also bloodless.
Yes.
Then
the second one fell from the sky.
There's a dog that gets beheaded.
Oh yeah, the dog is searching for the body and runs into some grass, and then 4 seconds later, his head is off and over there, and its body is off and over there.
Did they ever explain that?
Just that this creature must have just and ran away, which is not what it ever did any of the rest of the time. Everything it caught, it sucked the blood out of and threw husks on the ground.
That was early enough that I still thought it was going to be a human doing this, or human.
Or something humanish, like a human with a disease or some weird, like, oh, he's got weird,
but to me,
disease.
This is Pendergast in Peter Klein's The Fold, because it's
except The Fold was better.
The Fold is better.
Yes,
but they accidentally opened a portal that isn't teleporting them; it's changing dimensions, and they open a portal. To the same place Pendergast goes.
Yeah, the Lovecraft stuff. It comes through in lots of different stories, lots of different ways. in Pendergast, it felt very, very, very suddenly out of place. It just came out of nowhere. It was worse than when Pendergast was on the ship and got possessed by a ghost for no reason.
Well, it was a...
Which is the other worst book in this entire series.
It was a painting that makes him evil.
Yeah, he looked at a painting from Ghostbusters 2 too long like Ray did, and then it made his head all lumpy, and he walked around on the boat for a while until Constance yelled at him, but not with her scary Constance voice, with her actual Constance voice, and he was like, okay, I'm better now.
That was the previously worst book.
It was, and now it seems good in comparison, because this one, just the more I think about it, it felt like a fan fiction half the time.
Maybe.
Like, it didn't even feel like the real authors wrote it. It just felt sloppy and like, oh, well, we got a quota. We got to get a book out we got nothing. Like I said, D.B. Cooper, Georgia, and Cthulhu's.
There's a few long-running series where the author didn't want to write that character anymore, and they gave it to a different author. And it feels like that, even though the original authors wrote it. It feels like somebody else wrote it.
Well, these last few books, even, like, Pendergast has experienced no character growth. After his brother went away, his only thing has been, should I or shouldn't I sleep with Constance? I shouldn't, but I want to, but I won't. But she wants me to, but I won't. But we'll get close every book.
Did he have growth before?
I mean, there was the whole getting over his wife. That took him forever, and he finally did that. He doesn't ever think about her anymore. Then there was Diogenes, and that lasted forever and ever and ever until he got thrown in a volcano, which just saying that part just seems so goofy.
It is goofy.
But it happened. He's dead now. He's gone. Pendergast finally stopped thinking about him too. So did Constance even. And now that they don't have him to think about anymore, they've both just been... So the last 8 books have started out, on Pendergast, I'm going to take Constance on vacation because we just have too much stuff going on. I just want to take my ward on vacation. And then a case happens. Constance buys a house or some sort of real estate, spends all the money, and the book ends. And then the next book starts the exact same place. Oh, we got to go to a thing. Okay, but I wanted to go on vacation. Oh, maybe next time. That's how this book even ended. Oh, I want to take her on a vacation finally for real. Guess what? You're not going on vacation.
Puts Constance to work, but she's not. So he's an FBI agent. She's nothing.
Yeah, she doesn't even exist by today's standards.
Correct.
Like, she's dead.
Well, they did fake some documents for her. She was in the hospital for a while, then she got out.
Yeah, that's true.
She's a complicated character, but he just puts her to work, and what she finds out is crucial.
Yeah, it's always the thing that solves it now. Like, he doesn't solve anything anymore. It's always her that finds everything for him because he's too busy thinking about, should I or shouldn't I sleep with my ward?
Well, there was a scene.
What would people think?
There was a scene where, I'll call it 3/4 of the way in. You've got all of these random pieces, and then there's a scene where Pendergast calls Constance and Cold Moon together to explain it. And I'm just like...
He's like, you both know parts of the puzzle. Now it's time to give each other the information so you both understand.
I wanted to rip my face off during that scene. It was... oh my god. It was so painful to listen to him explain what was actually happening.
And he took so long. I'm like, just
it was so
get
stupid.
To the point. Because now I have to listen to the whole D.B. Cooper thing again, but explained from the start, but from before it started, in even more detail.
Yes, the briefcase that opens a window to another world.
Which, by the way, it's never explained how the briefcase did that. They explain how the souped-up version of the rebuilt machine had big electrodes and a thing opened up in between and it made like a doorway. Did this briefcase have like an LCD screen? Like, what was it doing here?
Well,
it had gears. And tubes.
There's a window into another world 1 minute in the future,
and that's the other thing. Does it have a camera? Because he said in order to get the window, he had to take it to the place he wanted to look at and aim it at the place and hit a button to calibrate it, and then he could look at that place from anywhere.
Utter goddamn nonsense.
And we haven't gotten even to the very worst part of it yet.
Well, this
not even the worst part.
This is a sticking point for me because the woman that stole this machine, not the person that invented the machine, but the woman that stole it,
D.B. Cooper, the woman who stole it.
She used this to make herself rich.
Yeah, by betting on stocks because they aimed the machine out the window of a skyscraper
But
aiming at the Times Square stock ticker.
That makes even less sense in modern times than it would have made in the 70s. Like, you can't trade fast enough.
It's true. I mean, unless she had
If you're
one
looking
hell of a connection.
If
for
you're
just
looking
a
one minute
ahead,
in the future,
yeah,
you can't make a stock trade that fast today.
I think they tried to explain that by explaining like that's why it was only these several main stocks, like because that's all that displays on the tickers. That way, it's only these main ones. So they had a thing set up with all the. I'm like, but still, it doesn't make
in the 70s. You
any
can't
sense.
trade that fast.
And someone, if they'd been doing that since the 70s, would have seen it by now. Like the IRS, the FBI, the CIA, someone would have come to her house and be like, we got to ask you some questions about this thing you keep doing and all these millions of dollars you suddenly have.
So she made herself rich.
Yes.
And then grew old. And
then had a helper who found out.
Yes.
And this is the part that's almost the worst part. Her, her butler found the machine.
Hotel manager.
And figured out how it worked.
Mm-hmm.
This quantum computing thing he figured out how it worked. And not only that, he said, oh, I know just how I can make a whole new one, bigger and stronger, that can see anywhere that I want at any time with more computing power.
He made it look further, so it went from 1 minute to an hour in the future.
And then it went way past an hour.
And then it went way past an hour. That's where things...
Except that then it didn't look to the future. That was the other thing they never explained, is how Constance turned a dial and turned it into a time machine in a Pendergast book that took her not only to exactly where she wanted to go, which is not where the machine was aimed.
Still New York.
But it should have spat her out 30 stories up of a building where she said only 3- and 4-story buildings exist at the time, and she should have fallen to her death. Also, it went 100 years back in time rather than into the future, and she was able to select the exact point in time that she wanted it to be focused on, to go back to her own past to prevent the evil things that happened to her, which were previously explained to not even be this world, so it doesn't even matter what she's about to try and go do, which a character as smart as Constance Green should have f***ing understood.
I'm saying she didn't travel in time. She traveled to another dimension that's 100 years in the past.
I guess it's all going to depend on how she comes back, because we know she's going to come back.
There should be 2 Constances in that universe.
There should be.
And she's trying to save her sister.
So it's either going to end up being Constance versus Constance.
It's going to be Constance versus the Doctor. But something needs to happen to the other Constance.
Yeah.
Or Constance comes back.
So either Constance is going to somehow come back with her sister, which is what I guess is she's going to do. So she at least has someone with her, which, oh my God, another Constance Green starting all over again from that beginning.
Jesus.
Oh, hell no. If that happens, I hope she just goes off and lives on an island by herself and lets Pendergast have adventures of Cold Moon in Colorado. Or they're going to do some bullshit where, kind of just like in Avengers, hey, we're going to go back to this alternate timeline, but if you stay in it, it brings you right back to this one, which in Avengers made sense. If you really stretch your mind and really try to make it make sense, you can make it make sense. I have such a strange feeling that because every time Pendergast talks to Constance, it's about their age difference.
Yeah.
We're going to end up with a Constance that is now either his same age, because she ages slowly, or is older than him and will show up again, or my fear is that she's already been in these books somehow and he already knows her and she's like his grandma or some bull, which is how he ends up with the house in his time.
Well, there's the great aunt that was in the hospital with Constance. Constance could have been talking to herself.
Oh God.
Half a series ago. The book ends with Constance going to this other dimension 100 years in the past.
Yep.
And by pushing the machine that far, it breaks the machine.
Yeah.
So Pendergast is in the original universe, Constance is in a different universe, and somehow this is the start of a trilogy.
My guess is that the next book will be entirely Constance in the 1800s. That's my guess.
That would make sense, but none of the rest
With maybe
of the
a
book
prologue
makes sense.
and an epilogue with Pendergast, who will have magically built a new machine that can somehow find exactly where she went. I still don't think that's the route they're going to take. I feel like we're going to end up with a Constance who's a different age now, because honestly, it's really felt like they have nowhere to go with her. The last few books, Constance has the same problems and makes the same complaints, and then they start off at the same place again. Let's go into a house, I'll buy a house and spend lots of money and get intrigued by some old mystery, and then I'm bored again.
And then the book's over.
Yeah.
Before I knew this was a trilogy, I thought this was her finale. Like, this, she was just gone at this point.
That's what I felt like too. Like, finally we got rid of her.
And then you tell me it's the trilogy, and I'm just like, what the
Well, because for a second I was like, oh man, now we're going to get back to old, depressed Pendergast, who was sad and depressed about his wife all the time, but then always had that Dr. House aha moment. And like,
Yeah.
no, this is going to be Doc Brown Pendergast, who's going to be like,
Oof.
Great Scott, Cold Moon. Come on, Corey. We need 3.47 gigawatts or whatever.
1.21.
Pendergast is going to be hanging a picture in his bathroom and fall off the toilet, hit his head on the sink, and have an idea for the flux capacitor. And it's going to run, and the time machine's going to run off of Cold Moon's nuclear burnt microwaved coffee.
Oh.
Because Pendergast will make some kind of, it's the only substance volatile enough on Earth in order to run my machine.
The
And
coffee.
he steepled his fingers with his honeyed voice.
Mm.
Cold Moon has been the most interesting thing.
Cold Moon has been a welcome addition to the series.
I feel like he is going to be the next one getting his own offshoots.
I hope so.
Like Nora and Corey,
Just find
who
a
are
good
also
narrator.
awesome. Corey is awesome. Nora is awesome.
Corey's been awesome.
I
She
still
started
miss,
in book 4.
I still miss Smith back.
Oh
I
yes.
still miss him. I have never accepted his identical brother as a substitute. Oh, it's Smith back, but in Florida. No, you killed him. He's gonna stay
He's
dead.
the less successful.
Sorry. You don't get to make him come back now because you regret that you killed him with a fake zombie in the last book. No. He's dead. That's I think why he's just gone again. We don't need fake Smith back.
Those are most of my notes. I do have a note here that just says I miss Proctor.
Oh, did he die or is he just in New York? He like almost dies.
He
all
walked
the
his
time.
way out of a desert.
That's right.
No, he came back. He showed up. He showed up back at the house
He-
at the very end of whatever that book was.
Yeah, that's right. Because he was like, it
It's-
looked like he walked to New York from the desert.
It's been 5 or 6 books since we've seen Proctor.
I feel like he spends so many of these books now just recovering. Like, oh, he got shot with a shotgun the whole next 2 books. Oh, he's still recovering. Oh, he finally got better. Now he's in the desert.
It could be because this book takes place days after the last case ended. So the last book.
The last 3 books have all been like that, just boom, boom, boom. Because Cold Moon is always like,
Cold
I'm
Moon is
supposed
so
to be.
pissed
I'm
off.
on my way to the airport. Why do you keep?
Sidelined for weeks.
They're expecting me in Colorado weeks ago.
There's a whole plot line to this book that we haven't even talked about. That's the documentary filmmaker and the like ghost hunter.
See, I almost forgot about them just because that whole thing felt like another book I had just read that was about a documentary ghost hunting team that was much better than this. That was another very odd voice. Like the voice of that main dude on that crew. I'm like, why are you using this Big Daddy Warbucks? Like, oh, all right. That's not what ghost hunters sound like. Watch Ghost Adventures. You gotta sound like a complete douchebag to be a ghost hunter. That's what they all sound like, complete douchebags.
So the main charlatan, really, the fake ghost hunter, his name is Mueller. And I'm like, is this supposed to be Mulder? Because he has a couple of like Mulder-ish.
Well, the book always called him Moeller.
Yeah.
Not even Mueller. So I was always like, how would that even be spelled? They always called him
I spelled
Dr.
it Mueller, but
Moeller.
I don't know.
And I'm thinking,
Moeller.
he's a tooth?
Yeah.
And like, to me, he was another one
But
with the weird voice. Because
he's
he had like the weird,
German?
the German sort of, don't look at my equipment.
Yes.
You must not photograph my equipment inside of its cases. Like, he talked like that.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Like he was a Nazi scientist.
Yeah. There was the senator who they set up
Oh, I forgot
Pendergast
the
to get
senator.
such sweet revenge on him. And I feel like when they did that, because they've done that in the books before, where someone will make a threat like, you'll see, I'm going to get you transferred to, like, Alaska. And Pendergast will be like, oh, we'll see how that works out for you. And at the end of the book, he serves them a comeuppance that's just like, boom! Everything you said you were going to do to me is being done to you, but worse. And haha, you can't do anything because I'm Pendergast. And in this book, the same thing happened. The dude talks some shit.
Yep.
Pendergast said,
You just wait.
Okay, all right. You'll see. And then they got to the end and were like, yeah, he's not going to be in any sort of shape to do that. We'll just have the mosquito kill the guy instantly. And that'll be the one scene in the entire audiobook that's got thriller, suspenseful music happening behind it.
Oh, the music. Yes.
Yeah, that one scene got sound effects and music, and then never again.
So
never before.
There's a senator in town that's doing a
rally.
A rally.
Yeah.
And when the rally starts, there's a loudspeaker sound effect.
Yeah.
That has not had a sound effect the entire rest of the book. But suddenly there's a loudspeaker.
Suddenly gets a megaphone. And we get to hear it through a megaphone for some reason.
And then they come back to it a little bit later.
I checked my earbuds. I thought that they had, like, unsynced to each other. And I was like, oh, and I resynced them. I'm just in a cave now for some reason. Okay.
They come back to the senator when the giant flying extra-dimensional mosquito kills the guy. And there's music.
Yeah. Like old school, like,
and sound effects,
like just the old, like, alien invasion, like old, like, Godzilla movie. It's like there's like this weird sci-fi, like, old school black and white movie, like, music happening in the background that then just fades away. I don't even think the scene was over. It just stopped as soon as the senator died. And they're like, whatever.
Yep.
Well, he's dead. Even crazier shit happened after that, but no music for them. No.
Whoever the producer on this made some serious mistakes.
Yeah. Hiring that narrator, keeping that narrator on, not hearing when the narrator calls Constance conscience. There is a point in the middle of that book where he calls her conscience. He says the word wrong. I swear to God it's in there. If I have to listen to this horrible book again to find it, I will do it if I'm challenged on that. But he does say it because I stopped it and I rewound it and I went, oh, really? Where was the producer?
The other thing was the original scientist that built the briefcase dimensional thing.
Yeah. Oh, he just went away.
Never discussed again.
Yeah. When he gets off the plane, when they deboard everybody because that's why D.B. Cooper happened, was because the whole thing wasn't to get the money and to parachute off. It was to get the briefcase from the scientist because the lady used to work at the same engineer place or something as the scientist guy did. And she wanted to be part of the ideas, but they, like, fired her or something, and he took all the credit. Or
he was going to give it to the government, and she's like, no, you can't trust the government with that. I'm going to steal it, but I'm going to hijack a plane to do it.
Yeah, oh, God.
Why didn't he just make another one?
Yeah, especially if it just was this little thing that fit in a briefcase.
In 50 years, he doesn't make another one?
Yeah, or, like, remember that he knew how? Like, hey,
what?
Here's the plans. Like, did he bring literally everything he had in this one briefcase and just forget? Like, he never came up again.
Maybe he has the reverse Doc Brown. He hit his head on a toilet and
forgot that he invented a time machine in a briefcase.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. Yep.
There was just everything about how that machine worked. You could tell they were like, here's what we want it to do, but we can't even visualize how it would do that, so we're just going to use some words. I was picturing the hallway from the Matrix of white doorways.
Oh, okay.
Like, literally, like when Pendergast goes in there, and because he's like, I have a theory on how to stop the giant mosquito, and then jumps into the time machine. Because the mosquito is also in the time machine.
Yes.
In its own world still.
Yes.
Doing its own thing still.
Yes. They can't kill it in this world because it also exists in the other world.
Yes.
But then wouldn't also Pendergast and Constance?
Yeah. So there should be two Pendergasts and Constances, and there aren't because nobody paid attention to the rules when they wrote this book. Everything about this time machine is everything I loved about Avengers Endgame and hate now about every other time travel thing that exists, is that none of them, they want things to happen and they don't care that they can't make sense to even, like, the dumbest of people. It just can't make sense. Pendergast went in and it was like a hallway of membranes. I'm like, what? What does that even mean? And then he just looked around and he saw what he was looking for and aimed at the membrane and pierced through. I'm like, aimed at the, so did he like pull, like, was he flying? Was he swimming? What, was he walking down a hall and went? None of what they described made any sense. And then like, he went through the membrane and that was just in the desert. I'm like, what the? But then he walked for a mile, but could still find his way back to where. So there's just like a big hole. Like, was there?
Yeah, I think so. The only way that I made sense out of any of it is thinking about other better told stories, and I think I might just re-listen to the fold after this and just sort of wash my brain.
Oh man, yeah. Everyone else is doing time travel and multiverse right now. We need to get on that bandwagon, which is another thing it felt like. Like, oh, everyone else is doing the multiverse right now, because they kind of are.
Mm-hmm.
We got to do that too, even though it makes no sense and should have been in a Gideon Cruz novel.
Yes.
And not in a Aloysius Pendergast novel. Ever. Mention Cyclopses at the beginning of this.
Because
those showed up in Gideon novels, which are also by these same authors, and in the same universe.
Gideon is
with some of the same characters.
The goofier offshoot.
He is Pendergast if Pendergast didn't try to be serious at all. But he is Pendergast. They're both geniuses who know everything about every situation they are in.
He is
have an ex machina always.
He's a nuclear engineer that is also a master of disguise, a master chef,
and an art thief.
And
knows about nuclear bombs.
In book 1, I'm like, what the is that? What? How can I believe Pendergast?
And he was what, like in his 20s, early 30s, and he like knew the equivalent of going to college for like 8 lifetimes.
Right. But Pendergast is we said it, the Sherlock equivalent. So I can accept.
To me, Gideon was like the hip Pendergast. He was, if you wanted to write Pendergast as not Sherlock Holmes, but still as everything.
He's a Donnie Wahlberg character.
He might be a Mark Wahlberg character at this point. You saw that one movie where he jumps onto the top of an airplane?
That's what I meant. He's a Mark Wahlberg
Donnie
character.
Wahlberg has standards. Jenny McCarthy notwithstanding. No.
Yeah.
Mark, he's like Nicolas Cage. Oh, you're going to give me some money and maybe a sandwich? I'm hungry. Let's do it. Let's go.
So Gideon is a Mark Wahlberg character.
Oh, 100% if they make those into movies.
Yeah. Everything about this book is terrible.
Yeah. Disappointing on all levels.
Because I looked at the Audible comments, and everyone was talking about the narrator.
If you want some fun,
everyone's
read the Audible comments about this book.
So many of them are. I returned this book, and I bought a physical copy because of the narrator.
Yeah.
And they rated it 1 star for performance, 5 stars for story. And I'm like, you're telling me you didn't finish the story.
Yeah.
Finish the story because it is terrible.
It is.
If you quit before you get to the ridiculousness, then you don't even know. You can't trust those comments.
No. The only thing you can trust is the narrator is bad.
Yes.
He is bad. But
we actually finished the book.
Yeah, we finished it.
Even though we didn't want to.
About 3 days each. And I think you power listened to it just so you could be done with it quicker. I listened to it at 100%
to read any more of them ever.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm going to see where this trilogy goes. This trilogy will be what decides. How it ends will be decides if I continue with Pendergast books or just follow the side characters and not care about Pendergast
I'm going to read the summary when the next book comes out. Well, if the summary is dumb,
it's gonna be dumb.
I'm out.
It's gonna be dumb. I'm gonna read who's doing the narration, because if it's that guy and it's 100% a Constance book,
oh
hell no.
Yes. But if it's a Constance book in the past, I'd be interested.
Yeah, in the past, back when they cared about Constance, but I don't think they do anymore, and I'm worried that this is just going to be her versus Diogenes all over again. Oh, I stalked him with my stiletto, and I'm going to stab him in the eye. And he was a doctor guy who was like, but I made you what you are, and isn't it great if you didn't deny
that could be an interesting story.
and then she'll probably fall in love with his dumbass, and then he'll live and won't get killed. And it turned out that he's Pendergast's grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why Pendergast doesn't age anymore, and why he can heal from every injury, including losing all of his blood, because he does bleed to death in this book. Literally, he bleeds to death, and
Does
then
he?
wakes up later like he always does, and is like, "Oh, I'm all good. It's fine." Yeah, they said he had like lost his blood volume and was empty. Like he was like flatlined and dead for minutes.
I don't remember now. Maybe that was one of the moments I spaced out.
And then just recovered instantly. And then, yeah,
I think.
which he always does. He's like Wolverine.
Anyway, I think that's everything that we could say about this book.
Yeah,
Not recommended.
not so much, unfortunately. It
But the
pains,
other
pains
Pendergast-
us to say this because we have followed this series for a while.
Just don't read this book. That's all I'm saying.
And if you are going to subject yourself to this book, get the physical copy or read it on Kindle.
Yep.
Unless you've never listened to any of the other ones, then maybe you won't mind. You'll probably still mind.
Hopefully next time we do one of these audiobook reviews, it will be for a better book.
Yeah, a good one. It's not great. It's not great.